Thrive Nation, on today's show, we are interviewing a pastor who once had to flee Communist Romania in order to avoid religious persecution. This man, Andrew, this guy knows what communism smells like.
Yeah, he's been there.
He knows what socialism does. And he knows about the universal poverty caused by communism and that thing called Marxism. Folks, Marxism is here. Marxism is funding Black Lives Matter. Marxism is here, and it has a smell. And that smell is hell. Andrew, I realize it just got serious, but have you gone online and watched some of these insane riots led by the Marxists? Have you seen these riots?
Oh, yeah, a whole lot of them. There's a lot of riots going on right now.
And I think a lot of people don't realize what's going on. You see that the phrase Black Lives Matter, the sentiment, that is something that I think everybody agrees with. Black Lives Matter, white lives matter, everybody's lives matter. But the sentiment and the phrase has been hijacked by George Soros, the same George Soros who admitted on 60 Minutes that he was, in fact, a Nazi at the age of 14. These people are organizing these riots, and Andrew, they're getting crazy.
They're getting really bad. There are over 100 days of riots over in Portland.
So I'm going to cue up audio. This is audio right now of what's going on and when Marxism spreads, okay? Right now in Spain, okay, the government, this is what happens in Marxism. The government, you give all the power to the government. The government in Spain right now is saying that if you do not wear a mask, you're going to have to go to a prison or a concentration camp or a re-education camp. You have to go somewhere. There's a woman walking down the road in Spain. This is today, folks. This was today. This was tweeted out by Justin Hart. This is in Spain. Cops are trying to detain a woman for not wearing a mask, and a dozen people throw off their masks and wrestle the lady from the grasps of the Spanish police. Listen to this audio. It's terrifying. She's being taken away by the police. And the crowd wrestles her away from the police. The police were going to take her away for not wearing a mask. In socialist countries, people lose all liberty, all right? And this is happening all throughout this country through this fascist government, a seizure of your First Amendment rights to peaceably gather and your Second Amendment rights to bear arms. It's crazy. And this is all to protect you from a virus where kids under the age of 15 have a better chance of getting hit by lightning than of dying of COVID-19. It's just unbelievable, folks. We've got to wake up to what's going on. This is a coup d'etat. You might not like it. We might not want to talk about it, but it's a real thing. And on today's show, we're interviewing a pastor who escaped from communist Romania. He has seen Marxism. He's seen it happen. He's watched people that he knows and loved be taken away and mass murdered for simply choosing to open their church. He's seen it happen, and he's here on today's show to sound the alarm and to wake everybody up to the dangers of Marxism.
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top, teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm a dive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the C&Z up on your radio, and now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get.
Yes, 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 and yes. Dr. Z is ecstasy when you are next to me. And Z, as an entrepreneur, you know what it's like to sacrifice to build a business.
Absolutely, you have to.
If there was a time where you were working 7 days a week to build that optometry clinic,
Yeah.
you were washing dishes.
Oh,
But the kind of persecution or the challenges we went through is nothing like growing up in a Marxist country where you have to fight just for the right to go to church. And on today's show, we're honored to be joined by a guest who has actually left. He fled Romania to start a church right here in Chicago, and just a great American. I had a chance to meet this gentleman. I had a chance to go to his church to attend his service. And Pastor, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. Wonderful. Thank you.
Now, there's some controversy out there, and I want to start off on a good foot. How do we correctly pronounce your name? I do not want to get the pronunciation wrong, because people, all the kids are going to be saying your name wrong all across the country.
I'm fine. It's Cristian Ionescu.
Cristian. Okay, Pastor Cristian. So, sir, tell us your background. When did you come over to the United States?
It was 1987. I was 24 at that time. I came to the United States as a religious refugee directly from Romania. As far as my files from Communist Romania were concerned, they relented when the Secretary of State at that time, George Shultz, put pressure on the government of Romania, tied to the most favored nation status that Congress would award some countries. And in order for Romania to keep getting those privileges, they had to give up on 40 families. And we were blessed to be amongst those 40 families. And we've immigrated in 1987, as I said, as religious refugees. And we've been here ever since.
And what's the name of the church that you pastor now, sir?
It's Elim Romanian Pentecostal Church.
And people have been asking me for now 5 months, 6 months. They say, why are you guys so passionate about talking about the COVID chaos, the 2020 chaos? And I tell people, I smell Marxism. Now, a lot of people don't know what Marxism is, Pastor. So tell me the first smell of Marxism that you caught a whiff of when you were in Romania. What was the first smell of Marxism that you saw or smelled?
You have to look at the regime. You have to look at the leaders. And there are quite a few syndromes that you have to watch for. Always evaluate the leaders in the system, the politicians. And I'm going to give you just two symptoms. And this is how I identify a totalitarian government, because this is what Marxism is basically, a totalitarian government. First of all, it's when you have a vindictive, a vengeful government. Look in California at what happens to the churches. They're still open. They threatened arrest. They threatened then cutting off their utilities. It didn't work. And then they said, okay, we're going to work on your parking lot facilities. We're going to go back on our contract. The city said, we're not going to give you the parking spaces. So when you see a government bent on getting its way no matter what, and not following only the legal procedures, because sometimes it's a PR disaster for them, but trying to hit you from collateral sides, then it shows that the government is vengeful. And a democratic government should never be vindictive. I mean, they should cut their losses, fold their tents, and leave you alone when they lose the argument. But no, when it's bent on doing something to you, being vindictive, that's Marxism. Secondly, a Marxist government cannot tolerate parallel forms of authority. And we have in this world parallel forms of authority. When I'm in the house, we have parental authority. When I'm at school, you have teacher's authority. When you are at church, you have clerical authority. When you are on the street or everywhere else, you have government authority. So it has to be a cooperation between these levels of authority. But when the government is attacking family and parental authority, it cannot stand it. When government attacks church authority, which is parallel, not submissive authority. Then you see totalitarianism. A Marxist government wants to dominate people from every aspect of their lives. They want to control their schools, they want to control their churches, they want to control their families, and they will impose their will. They have a recipe for every aspect of people's lives. They cannot tolerate parallel forms of authority.
Now, on today's show notes, I have everything that I am stating. It's all cited, and I encourage every listener to click on every one of the links I'm citing on today's show. But for sake of time, I just want to fire through a few things that are facts that might disturb people. The organization Black Lives Matter has hijacked the sentiment. They've hijacked the phrase Black Lives Matter, and the organization is run by Marxists. And you might say, how can you prove that? Well, we have a video clip of the founder of Black Lives Matter stating that she is a trained Marxist.
I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
Another example would be the mayor of New York. He goes by the name Bill de Blasio. However, that's not his real name. His previous name was Warren Wilhelm Jr., and he once supported the socialist government of the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Another example, the rioters right now in Portland brought out the other night, they brought out Winnie the Pooh, and they brought out Donald Trump. It was dressed like Donald Trump, a puppet dressed like Donald Trump, and a stuffed animal, and they put them under the guillotine and cut their heads off. And this is the Black Lives Matter organization. The Black Lives Matter organization has very corrupt people at the top of the organization, including George Soros. The same George Soros that was on 60 Minutes explaining why he was a Nazi at the age of 14 and why he doesn't feel bad about it.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours. Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. It created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt?
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. There was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Everything I just said to you, I have all the facts. I've gathered all the facts. And so I want to know there, Pastor, how bad did it get in Romania? What was the worst type of oppression that you saw in Romania from the Marxists?
Talking about what you've just mentioned, we need to understand, and I pity America because of that. In Romania, when socialism took over, there were only 800 under 1,000 members in the Communist Party of Romania. A majority of the people couldn't stand Bolshevism, couldn't stand communism, but the Soviet army came inside and imposed the government. So what did they use? They used proxies different terrorist organizations creating havoc on the streets, and then the communists came in and say, we're going to bring stability. So it was exactly what is happening right now, with a difference that in America, because of dozens of years of education, Marxist education in schools, we already have a generation, much of a generation, that is tied to communist and socialist ideas. But back to your question, in Romania, the worst thing that ever happened to us was what could happen to us. It was the constant fear of watching your back. You could not live your lives to the fullest. You are always expecting somebody to turn you on, to turn you over to the communists, to report on you. So you had to be very careful, even with people in your own families and your own circle of friends. You had to watch your back constantly. So before something happened to you, you are terrorized by what could happen to you. It was that terror floating above everybody's head. And I can see it now more and more in America.
You can see it, and I want to cue up this audio. This is an attorney by the name of Cristian Ionescu. He happens to not be white. He's on the Joe Rogan podcast. I want to cue up this audio clip. And Z, I briefly want to get your take on what he just said here. This is an attorney who happens to not be white. He's a black American. Let me cue up the audio here.
Black Lives Matter, the sentiment, I can get down with. Black Lives Matter, the organization, I cannot.
And why is that?
Because they are not for the same thing.
So what do you think?
The leader, the founders of Black Lives Matter literally just came out and basically said she's a trained Marxist. She didn't basically said, she said blatantly, she's a trained Marxist.
See, I think a lot of people today think that socialism sounds like volunteerism. They're like, oh, this makes sense.
Sure.
Free college. Oh, free health care. Oh,
for everybody.
Oh, so they're good, like reinforcements of free stuff.
Yeah.
How do you process this idea of socialist Santa Claus? Because I see a lot of people. I'm 40 years old, and I often find myself surrounded by people, and I'm going, how could you possibly be in favor of free health care and free college? How could you? I can't even grasp it. How do you process it?
Well, when you get enough people that don't have education, or they want education, or they want somebody else to pay for their education and their health care and their food and their housing. This isn't a race situation going on in our country right now. It's really a class situation. And what's so ironic about it is that most of these young people that are out there doing it come from a privileged area, come from a privileged background. Just like the other day, I had the young lady that got arrested up in New York.
Yes.
I mean, her dad was a psychiatrist and her mom was
multi-million-dollar apartment she lives in.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, why are you saying this? Because I think they think that you can't have the same opportunities and the same outcomes. You've got to pick one or the other. And all they want now is the same outcomes. In other words, you either have equal opportunity for everybody in this country. You can make it. And there's millions of examples of people, even myself included, that grew up with nothing and have made it. And then you have other people who are here that say, listen, we don't care about the opportunities. We just want everybody to have the same outcomes.
Now, Pastor, I want to get your take on this. I've been studying, Karl Marx has 10 planks. Now, I've been aware of these 10 planks for a long time because I study history. But see, I've been practicing to become a Marxist. So, Pastor, let me see if I'm doing it well here. I've got a megaphone. And what I do is I ask you a question, Z.
Yeah.
But I don't listen. I just start shouting.
Sure.
It's like a mob thing. So,
okay.
Z, capitalism is terrible. What do you think?
No, I think capitalism is wonderful.
Stand down! Stand down! Is that pretty accurate? Is that a good Marxist rhetoric there?
What we need to understand, and this is something that the American public is completely unprepared for.
Yes.
You see, when you argue with Marxism is a philosophy of slogans, of snippets.
Yep.
And a Marxist cannot sit and have an educated, commonsensical argument and discussion about anything. Because when you say we want free education, when we want free healthcare, then the common sense discussion that follows is who's going to pay for it, and if it's free, how much value it has, and who's going to control it, and what corruption can get to it. Everything that is free is prone to corruption. We need to understand that, because somebody has to discriminate on who gets the free stuff first. So the problem with communism, it cannot argue intelligently and in a common sense way its philosophy. So it gets to be very short and screamed at the people, and you will always find fertile minds that will absorb it because it's in their interest. But let me tell you who puzzled me the most. You see these billionaires and multimillionaires adhering to communism and to socialist ideas. And this is getting to another level. It's demonic. Why? Because it's self-destructive. Communism is about confiscating property and possessions. Whatever you have is theirs. It's not the states, because state, what is state? State is nothing. It's a bunch of people that control the state. It is the clique that is in control of our lives. So they get to possess everything that everybody possesses. When a multi-billionaire is on the side of socialist ideas, he's for everything that he owns being confiscated by the system. So in my mind, only Satan is self-destructive. And his philosophy is a philosophy of self-destruction. Look at this country, so well off, so prosperous, so wonderful. It's the best thing I've ever imagined in my life when I came here in 1987. And some people ask me, where are those people? Where those people are buried? They were old then and they got buried in the ground, and we have a new generation to deal with. But America is a phenomenal concept, an exceptional concept. And when I see that this philosophy takes hold in this generation and is already destroying much of America, it's really puzzling.
Have you picked out the next country you're going to hop to after USA goes down to Marxism? I mean, have you got one you kind of sorted out? Maybe
Ronald Reagan said it best. There's no other place.
You're right. Yeah, we're thinkers. So I guess we got to fight for a country. Also, did you ever visit the forested region of Transylvania in your home country of Romania?
Oh, many times.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
Did you actually get to meet Dracula, or is that just...
No, actually, for those who don't know the history, Dracula is just an invention of Bram Stoker. In reality, Vlad Tepes was a leader that America might need now. You know that in his time, he would put a golden cup at a fountain, and nobody had the courage to steal it.
Wow.
Pastor, I want to ask you this because I really do feel like we're in the fourth quarter. We're down by 6 points, playing a football game here, and we need a touchdown and the extra point. We're not down by, in my opinion, I don't think we're down by 13 points with 2 minutes to go. We're down by 6 points. We're in the final quarter. We got a couple minutes on the clock.
And we've got the ball.
We got the ball. Got all of our timeouts. We can do this thing. I just want you to, because I think some people, we got to kind of be scared into waking up a little bit. So I just want you, please explain what happened to your fellow pastors, to your fellow people in Romania once the Marxists took over. I mean, did it take over? Was it over a period of months? Was it a period of days? What happened? Tell me about the progression once the Marxists got in control.
Well, they had a playbook for pastors and for leaders in general. And I see the playbook applied here nowadays. First of all, they would try to coerce you into following them and fit their narrative. And they would say, listen, this is a new system. Do you want to be part of the system? If you are out of the system, you're in trouble. They will negotiate with you. They will say, if you agree with us and cooperate with us, this is what you get. If you don't, this is what we take away from you. If they couldn't do it, they will find your peers and they will attack you through them. They will say, this guy is an exception, he's a goon. Look at what the majority of pastors think. Look at what other pastors think. And they isolate you. And then if you do not cooperate, still do not cooperate, they will eliminate you by all necessary means. This is what they should expect.
So the 10 planks of Marxism, I want to go over these real fast. I'm going to go rapid fire, and I'd like to get your take on these. So we're going to go, it's kind of like a not top 10. It's like the 10 things we don't want to talk about, but we need to talk about. So I'm going to fire them off, and you tell me how you saw it happen in Romania. So plank number 1, the abolition of property and land. Talk to me about this.
1948, they confiscated all the manufacturing plants. By 1962, they confiscated all the lands, and you either cooperated and entered the system, or you were killed. It's that simple.
Plank number 2, a heavy progressive graduated income tax. How did you see that happen?
Well, they are saying that they are going to tax everybody fairly. But the problem is it never happens. What happens is you never see the taxes withdrawn from your salary. You don't pay taxes. They're already taken out before they pay you the salary. So it's such an equalized system where a doctor would not make much more than a, let's say, welder.
Okay. Plank number 3, the abolition of all rights of inheritance. Did you see that happen?
Well, yes, when the inheritance is noticeable. Otherwise, if it was a car or a little house or something very little, it didn't matter. But there was no more inheritance left because they confiscated everything from everybody. There was no inheritance, nothing. Maybe a little piece of furniture or something.
Confiscation of all property of all immigrants and rebels to the state.
Oh, that was a very large category because they would make you fit in any of those if they need to.
Centralization of the credit in the hands of a national bank.
There was only one bank in Romania, and you couldn't get credit for much anything because you couldn't establish your own business. There was no such. You could get credit to get a piece of furniture or a car or something very small.
Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state.
Right. It was public transportation that was very lousy. You would stand in a bus station or tram station for an hour and a half. Those were not heated during the winter, not cooled during the summer. It was horrendous. I've traveled by public transportation. It was controlled by the state. You couldn't complain to anybody, and that's that.
The extension of factories and instruments of productions owned by the state. State takeover of factories. How did you see that happen?
Well, first of all, let me talk a little bit about communications. There was only one company of communication. You have no competition, and they used it to survey what everybody was talking about or what everybody did. As far as manufacturing, there was only manufacturing owned by the state, no private.
The establishment of industrial armies, especially agriculture.
Well, when you talk about any dimension of industry, agriculture, anything else, it was owned by the state and it was one section. There were no sections. There were no partitions. And everybody had to do his part. For example, they would take students to work in agriculture. They would take workers to work in agriculture. They would take students to go into the manufacturing plants. I mean, it was so interchangeable that you were a slave to the state. They would do whatever they needed to do with you.
The gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country.
Well, Ceausescu had the plan of destroying thousands of small villages and destroy the country lifestyle. The reason he wanted to bunch people up in blocks of flats, in apartment buildings, in towns, so they control them better.
Okay, plank number 10, free education for all children. The abolition of children's, it's crazy. A combination of education with the industrial production.
Oh, well, what do you know? This sounds so wonderful every time you say free education. Well, it was free education, but the education was based on the state curriculum. They would teach you flawed history. They would impose Marxist ideas on your children and everything else that goes with a Marxist system. At the same time, you couldn't go to fulfill your preferences and whatever you felt inclined to do. It doesn't matter if you wanted to be a doctor. People with some personal relationships up there, they might get a chance, but they will send you where the system considered that there was a shortage. So you might have no inclination towards mechanics or mathematics, but there you are because this is what the system forced you to do.
I have two notable quotables from Karl Marx I would like to get your take on because you lived it. You escaped it. You're educating us about it. You're sounding the alarm about it. I appreciate you being here. Karl Marx said, "The last capitalist we shall hang will be the one who sold us the rope." What do you think about Karl Marx?
Oh, he has sold his soul to Satan. First of all, he's right. Capitalism gave socialism the rope because socialists, like terrorists, they use the freedoms that capitalism provides and use it against the system that provides it.
Final notable quotable from Karl Marx. He says, "Religious suffering is at one and the same time the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." He's saying religion is the opium of the people. Why are Marxists so obsessed? Right now, you're seeing it in the country. We can go buy liquor. We can go gamble. We can buy pot. We can't go to church. We can do a lot of things, but you can't go to church. Why is socialism and Marxism so opposed to the church?
Because it's a parallel form of authority and a superior form of authority. It connects you to a higher standard of thinking. And this is what they cannot tolerate. It is impossible to have true religion and be a Marxist. It is impossible. But let me put it this way.
Yes.
Why they consider religion the opium of the people? It's like a refuge from the hardships of life, from the suffering in life. There's suffering in this life. Whether you are a Marxist, whether you are an atheist, whether you are religious, there is suffering and there is pain in the world. And the fact that Marxists would rather have people take opium and liquor, and socialist countries are the worst when it comes to drinking and smoking. It is because at the root of it, Marxism is satanic. We need to understand that it's a spiritual problem. Marxism is not just a philosophy.
Yes.
It is Satanism.
So for Z and I, we're guys who want to win this war. We want to take the ball, fourth quarter, down by 6. We want to win.
We want to win.
What can we do right now? I know that Pastor Brian and I visited you in Chicago. We tried to draw some media attention to the persecution you were experiencing from Mayor Lightfoot. I know Pastor Brian's traveling all around the world right now with peaceablygather.com, waking people up. I know Sean Foyt, your very good friend.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Z, the praise and worship leader. He's doing outdoor praise and worship services right now in California, drawing crowds of 10 and 12,000 people every night. What can we do? What can our listeners do right now to fight back?
Do what you're doing. You're doing wonderfully. I had the privilege to have known Pastor Gibson, and he visited our church in the worst moments of our fight, and I really appreciated that very much. He's a dear friend right now, and whatever he's doing, he needs to continue doing. Whatever you're doing, you need to continue doing. But above all else,
yes,
and I cannot state that enough, it is a spiritual battle.
True.
Because we fight spiritual dominions. And what this nation has to do is pray and fast. I am telling you one more thing. We need to mobilize churches, and we need to mobilize the evangelical Christians like never before. One of the most untapped resources for conservatism in this country,
yes,
is the evangelical community. Millions and millions of people that do not vote. I was one of them, and I'm sorry for that.
Ephesians, that's the book I've been reading right now. Is there a certain book of the Bible you would direct our listeners to? Because, the Bible's a big book, but would you direct this? I mean, I've been reading Ephesians and Isaiah. Both times my head's going to explode. I believe that God gave us authority over this earth. When Jesus passed away, he ascended up into heaven, and Jesus is seated at the right hand of God.
Yes.
And he's given us authority over Satan. We have that. But is there a certain Bible verse or a certain chapter we should be looking into there, sir, and we should be praying about and meditating on?
You see, in Ephesians chapter 1, the Bible says, Apostle Paul said, I'm praying that the God would enlighten your mind to see that by the new birth, it's a spiritual birth. We have been resurrected spiritually, and we are in Christ in heavenly places. But then in chapter 6, it says, in the heavenly places, there are the dominions and the authorities and principalities of darkness. So Christ is there. We are there in Christ.
Yes.
The dominions of darkness are there. So yes, where all these are present, there's a fight. But there's something more to it. It says Christ is above. When we are in Christ, when we take our spirituality and Christianity seriously, we are in Christ and we are above. Fighting from above always means victory. And I think God called us to be victorious. In chapter 3 of Ephesians, it says he wants to prove through the church in front of all these dominions his wisdom and his power.
That right. See, that's power.
That dog will hunt.
Pastor, I appreciate you joining us today. You've inspired me and so many people. Don't quit fighting there, sir. Keep it up. We'll be praying for you without ceasing. And again, I'm just honored to have you on the show, and thank you for having the courage to share about the madness of Marxism and the universal poverty caused by communism. I really do appreciate you, sir.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me. God bless you. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
God bless.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!